So ground effects is not dead. This is the argument, right? What's more important, the show or the commercial aspect?
But then what you're saying is, if you're a new manufacturer, forget Audi for a second, right? What you're saying is, oh, well, sorry, this is how it works. If you want to come in, come in. If you don't want to come in, that's fine.
We are doing that to appease an incoming engine manufacturer. And the payoff is that we lose potentially a really close championship battle from 2026 onwards.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Tired F1 Pod. We are back, and we're more tired than ever. Shez, it's good to see you after what appears to be a long hiatus.
Oh, yeah. But it is good to be back. It's great to be back and good to be talking to you again, Ammar. How are things?
Indeed. Things are great. I'm still running the high of the results at Monaco, and we're hoping for something similar in the upcoming race in Montreal, but we'll see. But in the meantime, there has been stuff happening in this last week. Actually, there's been a lot more stuff than I think I imagined happening. One of which, and seems like an appropriate place to start with or at, is the 2026 regs just dropped, and there's quite a bit in there. There's a video that the FIA released, and there's been a lot of chatter on the internet as soon as it's happened. So I'm curious to know what your take is on what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of mildly optimistic about what they've done. Like the aims all sound really good. Just to summarize, there's three main areas. There's a power unit change, there's a aerodynamic change, and there's a chassis change. So in terms of the engine, we're going to get rid of the MGUH, and we're moving to an energy recovery system that is going to have a bit more driver control. So there'll be essentially a push to pass button on the straights to help with the car following. From an aero point of view, the cars are moving away slightly from ground effects. So the floors are going to be partially flat with a slightly shorter diffuser. So you won't have the elaborate tunnels that we have right now. So the teams won't have the same level of ground effect. And the reason for doing that is that they won't then have to run the cars really low and really stiff, which should be better for drivers and give the cars a wider operating window. I just want to clarify one thing that you may have read on social media, that somehow ground effects is dead and the FIA are somehow having to walk back all of the promises that they made in 2022. I don't think that's true. If you listen to what Nicholas Tombazis actually said, they're trying to reduce the downforce that these cars produce, and their estimation is about 33%. So the cars are producing less downforce, but the way that they generate that downforce is still the same as it was before, i.e. ground effects. But because they have a partially flat floor and a shorter diffuser, the amount of downforce that they can produce is much less. So we're not going to go to overbody aero. It's not going to be like we're going to have those barge board sculptures that we had back in 2021, or the Dumbo ears and shark fin tails that we had back in 2007 and 2008. The downforce is still going to be from the underfloor, but it won't be as much. And the reason for that is having less downforce, having shallower tunnels, having a bit of a flat floor means that the cars don't need to be run quite as low. They don't have to have quite as stiff suspension. So they should be a bit more compliant than the cars we have right now, which is better for performance overall, and better for the driver's health, really. So ground effects is not dead. It's still being used, but we're just seeing a reduction in its effectiveness for this generation of cars. But the big change from the aero point of view is that they're bringing in active aerodynamics, and that means that at the push of a button down a straight, the cars will have adjustable front and rear wings to give you low drag on the straights, and then as soon as you come to a corner, that will bleed off, and the front and rear wings will change, and you'll get high downforce in the corners, and that will hopefully eliminate the drag that they're getting down the straights at the moment, that they're needing to put on to give themselves downforce in the corners. The holy grail that the F1 teams are constantly searching for, the balance between drag and downforce. And then finally, from a chassis point of view, we're going to get cars that are shorter, narrower, and about 30 kilos lighter. So everything that we've been talking about over the last couple of races, Monaco and Imola, those tracks seemingly having been left behind by the ballooning size of these cars, these rules look like a first step towards trying to redress that balance and trying to get us back to what Formula One used to be: smaller, lighter, nimbler cars is how they've described it. How did you ingest it?
Yeah, I agree. I felt much the same way. I was really happy to see everything that you just described here at the end, which is they will become smaller and more narrower, lighter, and all of those things will add to a better Monaco experience, a better Imola experience, a better Singapore experience, a better experience around other tracks as well. And I think that having the driver control a few of these things will be really, really interesting. And now that driver talent comes to the forefront, which is something I know we've been wanting to kind of see. Whenever we talk about driver comparisons and being in similar cars and whatnot, not that their nuances will go away just like that, but it does seem like they're putting a lot more back in the hands of the drivers as well. So that does seem interesting. I love seeing that they're going that direction, and then I kind of hope that we go to biofuels as quickly as possible and maybe kind of bring back some of the engines that we did back in the day, perhaps in the next reg set. So I'm already looking ahead too.
Yeah, but you could argue though that if we didn't have the current engine rule change in 2026, that we wouldn't need the chassis and aero changes. That seems to be what, if you look at what Adrian Newey said prior to this all coming out, that he was worried that essentially the V6, the internal combustion engine, would just be a generator. It would just be running all the time just to power up the battery, because you're going to have 50% of the energy deployed by the engine and 50% by the electrical systems. And actually, if you just stuck with what we have right now, you wouldn't need to have all of the aero changes. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, right, that they've decided to make these changes now. In our past video, we talked about whether it makes sense to do this, these level of changes and get rid of the hybrid, right, and essentially the MGUH, right. And one of the biggest reasons for that happening is the new entrant coming in 26, right, and while that makes all the sense in the world, I think that this again feels like another step in that direction of kind of going back to the way things were. What I also think is fascinating is we can talk more about this, is have we given these regulations, the 2022 regulations or the 21 regulations, enough time for them to work out, right? In a past video we talked about, well, maybe we should kind of look at 2030 and see if that needs to be tweaked or there need to be further changes or not. And I think this is all fascinating, right? But these regulations need to be changed because you have a new entrant there, a works team, and you need to bring them on board.
Yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because look, the reason that the reason that the chassis regulations are changing is because they need to manage the engine, and the power unit is being changed because they were trying to get VW Group in. They got Audi, but Audi have come in on the basis of the fact that they've simplified the energy recovery systems, so that the other teams don't have the massive head start that they would have had if they hadn't. This is the problem that tripped up Honda in 2015. You know, they turned up and had to play to the same rules that everybody else had, but everybody else had a season already to get their act together. Audi are sidestepping that, but that's coming at the detriment of having to change a set of rules that, as you said, we said in a video which we've got a link to here, that perhaps we're getting to the point now that happens in every regulation set, that you get domination right at the beginning, and then 2 or 3 seasons in, all the other teams start to catch up. You start to get convergence, and we're now in a season 2024 where McLaren and Ferrari are not just biting at the heels of Red Bull, but are able to take wins off them and at least make races competitive. You look at Imola, that was still a competitive race, even if Max won it. That's all I want, really. I don't need Max to to lose. I don't need other people to win necessarily. I just want there to be a competition. We're getting that now. So to change that in 2 seasons' time, when next season will probably be even closer and even more exciting than it is now, to change that the following year to get another era of domination, only to then reset again a few years down the line, to me seems like madness. But you can see that the only reason that they're doing it, I think, is because they're needing to get Audi in.
Yeah.
So I think we're left with a go on.
No, I think you're right. But I mean, the commitment to getting Audi was made a while back, right? Like, so yes, I can see your point and your frustration in that. Look, I would love to see a season where you have 3, 4, 5 teams, and you could argue that Mercedes kind of lost their way there, but it is conceivable that if not this year, that next year they would be right there too, because if that ceiling is truly met, and we can see Red Bull there or thereabouts, right, with that ceiling, Ferrari, McLaren probably going to catch up by the end of the year. Conceivably, Mercedes are in next year. Who knows what that looks like, right? So I can see that, but at the same time, when you've made that commitment to Audi, you don't want Audi coming in and being so far behind, kind of like the Honda stuff, right? You don't want that to happen too. So
Ammar, this is the argument, right? What's more important, the show or the commercial aspect?
Oh yeah,
I mean, ultimately, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a product that we want to watch, right? You're getting to a point where it is watchable. It's going to be watchable this season and next, and we're gonna knock that on the head. And somebody else, just like they have every single season that there's been a rule change, somebody will tell. It won't be Audi. You mark my words. It won't be Audi that are suddenly dominant and ahead of everybody else. It'll be Mercedes or Ferrari.
Be one of the big four, right? Yeah.
Right. It's not going to be one of the new guys, and they're going to be dominant for 2-3 seasons. We're going to be sitting there watching another 2023 season, going, what was the point? These rules have failed. But actually, the rules haven't failed. We can talk about that in a second. Do we actually think that 2022 rules need changing? Do they need changing?
Okay.
Open question.
So there are many layers to this, right? But I think to go back to what you first started with, we are now in an era of Formula One where commercial interests and marketing are the overarching force and the overarching theme over every decision that's being made. So that is a given. Whether we like that or not, I guess that's a separate discussion. But we brought so many new fans to the table thanks to Drive to Survive. The ratings are up again this year, despite it being one of those years where we thought, oh my God, this was going to be Max and Red Bull running away with it. The ratings everywhere you look are great. The circuits are being sold out for race weekends. It's going to continue to happen, and we're only a third of the way through the season now. So I think that the answer to that question is, yeah, we're going to keep tinkering around because you want to kind of make sure that there is this element of surprise. Now, I think the disconnect here, right, if I'm hearing what you're saying, is the intention of the rule and the actual outcome of it is that's where the disconnect is, right? I mean, the hope would have been that, look, again, we can go back to the 2022, right? And we can talk about that. Part of it also is driven by Ferrari's incompetence those first couple of years. If Ferrari were just slightly better, right, in 22, it could have been a different season, and therefore they could have been slightly better in 23, right? But you cannot control regulations based on that. You have to kind of look at the macro, right? And then there's another area of this that I want to get into with 26 in particular, which is the cost cap. And what I think we are in, right, is again, this era of Formula One where the teams have decided that making money, and Formula One too, by the way, that making money is paramount. Exhibit 1, you say that you're going to have, we'd love to have an 11th team, maybe on a 12th team. And guess what? You tell Andretti, no. Why? Because you risk the chance of losing a piece of the pie, right? This is another thing with the cost cap, right? So no changes to the cost cap, at least as far as I understand it with these regs. Maybe I've missed something. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems like, again,
I mean, these are just technical regulations, right? So they are talking about increasing the cost cap limit.
They're going to increase the cost cap. Correct.
Yeah,
but part of the reason why they brought the cost cap in is they told everyone that this was about creating parity, right? But these engine change regulations and regulation change in general go against that, because the more you keep changing things, the more teams are going to have to scramble or go, more resources are required, and we kind of keep going through the cycle, right? So that was a false hope that was given to us. What is the reason for having a cost cap? Well, you look at some of the other American sports. You look at the NBA. You look at the American football, which is the NFL. These are all cost cap leagues. Now, of course, it's not apples to apples because there we're talking about cost cap on player salaries. It's not the same here with drivers, but in essence, it's the same thing, right? You're putting a cost cap on the main areas of the expense. And the whole idea is to prevent millionaires and billionaires from spending more on the things that can make them more successful. In those leagues, it's all about spending on talent, as in players on the field. In this particular iteration of this sport, right? It is all about being able to gain advantages in the car, in the engineering, in the mechanics, all of that, right? And the more you spend, at least up to a certain point, the rewards are pretty evident, right? To the point where we can, having driver talent isn't really as impactful as being able to, of course, if you have a bad car, you have a bad car, right? So these regs, again, are set up in a way that allow for these teams to make money. We've talked about that with Haas as well. Haas will not sell now because guess what? They don't have to worry about it. They don't have to spend beyond a certain amount and they can just be mediocre and it'll be fine. So these regulation changes are, again, going to hurt teams that cannot really catch up with it. But you might have the wild card there. And I think Formula One is now in that era where they want that to happen.
So two things there. The first thing I would say is that, look, if you're the cost cap, what it's done is that it has allowed teams lower down the grid to, number one, survive, right? So they're not at risk every season of falling off the end of the grid. And in theory, has given them the chance to catch up. So Williams will catch up at some point once they have their infrastructure in place and the methods of working are up to date. Once they've been able to spend the money they needed to do that, which they are doing right now, they will catch up. But you need to give that process time.
Some time, yeah.
What I don't think you can expect is that the first season of a rule set, everybody's going to be bunched up together within a tenth of each other. That's just not realistic. There's always going to be one team that's going to have managed to get ahead of everybody else. And in this rule set, it was Red Bull. In the last rule set, it was Mercedes. And in the rule set before that, it was Red Bull again. So these things come in cycles, but what happens towards the end of those rule sets is that everyone converges. And that's taken a bit longer because of the budget cap. And I think the thing that they haven't taken into account is how long that convergence would take. Although actually, to have done it within 3 seasons is actually not that bad.
Yeah.
So to my argument would be, let these percolate for a little longer. Give it a little longer to get to your endpoint. But the reason they're not doing that is because of Audi. And you're talking about the commercial reasons. There's more eyes on the sport now than there ever have been before. Can you tell me with a straight face that having Audi in is going to have more impact than a close championship battle in terms of viewers watching the sport?
But it's not just that, right? Their commercial interests are way beyond just viewership as well, right? And I don't have
that has to be the biggest one, though.
But this is what I go back to, right? Like the overarching philosophy has changed now, right? In the hands of Liberty Media, this is what you're going to see. And as someone who lives in the States and consumes American sports in general, I see this happening elsewhere too. Like the whole idea is you want it to be as competitive and have these more resets as much as possible. We have this in other leagues too, where every few years they'll bring in rule change. Now, again, I think there's a distinction. I think you're 100% correct in that the delta between the intent of the change and the actual outcome of said regulations has been wider. But it's also driven by the randomness of teams getting it wrong. Look, Mercedes gets this right. They might be in a different
but I don't think
Red Bull dominates.
I actually don't think that's true. The intent of the rule, the technical regulations, let's separate the budget cap away from this for a second, right? The technical regulations in 2022 were designed to make the cars follow better, and they did. Yes, the teams have slashed that. They have, but we're still better than we were in 2021.
So they worked, right?
Right. So from a technical point of view, yes, they did work. They haven't done everything because physics just doesn't work like that, and the teams will come up with ways to circumvent the intention of your rules. So tweaks are the right way to go forward. But what Nicholas Tombazis has said, the head of single seater at the FIA, is that they didn't want to bring in the tweaks because they were planning for a big regulation change in 2026. Now, if you take that away, they could have brought those tweaks in, and we would have got back to the 2022 levels of loss of downforce to the car behind, and had that closer racing, right? Without having to have a massive major reset that runs the very real risk of just leading to domination again. We're just going to have the same problem we've had for 22 and 2023. And I take your point about other commercial reasons, right? But for me, the biggest thing that's a moneymaker for F1 is people watching the freaking sport. And if you're not going to get more eyes on the sport having a new manufacturer than you are with a close championship battle, which I think you would in the next couple of seasons with convergence.
Yeah, but I think this is also a long-term versus a short-term thing. Again, the commitment to Audi was part of a greater strategy.
Yeah, but Ammar, it's not long-term.
Well, what do we do? Just keep the same regs and let them come in like this, and then struggle for a couple of years, and then we're saying, hey, should Audi even be in the sport? And then you're not going to make your teams more appealing to people who want to buy them up. Look, right now, part of why they're doing this whole sort of scarcity model and that they're not opening up 2 other slots to teams is they know that this is valuable.
I think the VW Group have been the most fickle manufacturer in the history of motorsport.
Oh, wow.
Every time the FIA have tried to entice them, they turn up and say, yeah, we're interested. They turn up to all of the engine discussions. They turn up to all the chassis discussions. And then when the rules are published, they say, no, we're not interested. Right? Porsche did it. VW did it in the last rule set. They did it when the new.
Well, they're coming in now, though, right? That's confirmed. So
yes, yeah, great, they're doing it, but at what cost?
But I also don't think it's just Audi as a whole, right? I think that they're attracting other manufacturers too. And look, there's something to be. Look, I also think that part of the regs set changing right now is because they've caught themselves up in the way the engines are made right now, with all the intricacies of the MGU-H and MGU-K as well, right? If it were back in the day where it was just a simple V8, right? That would be just fine. It's not that anymore.
So yeah, I'm with you.
But then what you're saying is, but then what you're saying is, if you're a new manufacturer, forget Audi for a second, right? What you're saying is, oh well, sorry, this is how it works. If you want to come in, come in. If you don't want to come in, that's fine. Then you can't really do that.
That is how, right? Ammar, that is how it should be. And look, my counter to what you've just said is you keep the same engine regs until 2028 or whatever. By then you've had enough time for synthetic fuels to increase the amount of synthetic fuels that you're using in the fuel that the cars are currently using, and then go to a fully only synthetic fuel naturally aspirated engine 2028. Porsche are already on the forefront of this. This is what they're doing. They're developing synthetic fuels for their own naturally aspirated engines for their road cars. If you're talking about road relevance, that's what Porsche want to do. Have them come in. And we've already talked about this. You don't need to have all the hybrid nonsense, right? This is not the idea that Formula One is a test bed for road relevance is nonsense. We've had these engine regulations since 2014, right? 10 years. How many road cars have come out with an MGU-H? 1. And it hasn't even come out yet. The AMG 1. No one else has, because it's nonsense technology that no one can use on the road. Sod it. Get in a normally aspirated engine, give us some sound, give us some revs, and give us some synthetic fuel. That's what I want. And keep the rules as they are for a little bit longer so we get a good championship. But anyway, look, I don't want to do a total downer on these rules, because actually some of the chassis regulations do sound good. I do want to talk about some of those things. Smaller, lighter cars, for me, sounds like a good thing, and it does sound like a good pathway to where I think F1 should be headed. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it makes sense, right? I mean, we talked about this on the heels of the last 3 races that really happened, right? I mean, I will say this: I don't know if this is enough, right? So while this seems like the right step in the right direction, I don't know if it's enough. But I have to assume that by making this step, that they have, 1, reacted to seeing what we've all been complaining about, and 2, that you can expect, hopefully in the future, for cars to get even lighter, even more smaller, even more, sort of Monaco friendly, I'm going to call it, as much as they can. I mean, look, to a certain extent, you're not going to change how certain races work anyway, but I think there's nothing more to be excited about than with all of this. And I was kind of intrigued by the fact that yes, a lot of the ground effect stuff has been taken out, but a lot of it has not, right? And I now think
Yeah,
about, like,
agreed.
what does
Exactly.
Adrian Newey do with all of this? Did he know about this? Does this change his decision? I'm intrigued by that kind of stuff. What does Carlos Sainz do now that it seems like being with a Mercedes engine customer or Ferrari engine customer seems like a good bet right about now. I don't know what this means for Aston Martin with the Honda stuff as well. So I think laden in all of
Well, I
these
mean,
is
they're
some set
they're all
of
just going to have to
questions.
design for this particular rule set.
Yeah,
But I do like the fact that, like, there's two things. One, they're physically making the car smaller, but second, the active aero. If you look
it's
at
really great.
road cars, cars like the Pagani Huayra have been using active aero like for years now, and that acts to make your car a bit smaller. Like, not in reality, but virtually, it makes your car a bit smaller because you've got that low drag down the straight, which is what you want from a long aerodynamic streamlined car. And then you get into the corner, the active aero hits, you get loads of downforce, the car gets shorter, and you go around the corner in a much more controlled way. Love it. I'm really happy with that. I think it's a fun way to do things. So smaller light cars, active aero, happy to see both of those things come in.
And on
Not
that
yeah.
note, RIP to the fine folks at Suzuka who came up with that hat with the DRS opening, right? Like, RIP to that. Poor people. Like, they did such a good job with that. I'm sure they'll figure out something with
Did
it.
you really hate the DRS that much, though, Ammar? I
I
like the
liked
fact that
it.
they're
I
using
don't
a
mind it.
yeah.
I think
I didn't mind it either. Yeah.
along the way, I think there was a suggestion here that said that, we're probably using DRS incorrectly, right? Where they're allowing, at least in this iteration of what races have been the last couple of years, right? Instead of allowing drivers to use that when they're within a second, how about letting them use that up until they get within a second, or maybe a half a second, whatever that measurement would be, and then kind of let it go? Because just seeing a straight pass, like, especially when the way Red Bull figured this out, right? That would be kind of crazy. And look, I think maybe folks at Red Bull will be a little bit more, I guess, unhappy with it, right? Because they seem to have figured out how to use that even better.
Whatever, man. I don't care about one
Oh,
particular team, but I do like what I do like is the idea that, one car is going to be in low drag mode, or in fact both cars are going to be in low drag mode, like absolutely streaking down the pit straight at Monza, but the car behind has got a little button to press, IndyCar
that's
style,
amazing. Yeah.
to give themselves a little bit more energy. Be nice to have that with a bit more engine rev, so you can hear it as well. And then, you see that car getting ever so closer, and then getting through into the first chicane at Monza. It would just be beautiful to watch. But it does depend on F1 getting the graphics right. They have to be able to show us when a driver is deploying that energy. Otherwise, it becomes like, what are we watching?
Didn't
Like,
we have the battery technology a while back? Like, what were the
we
years
did when we
again?
had KERS, because
Yeah, we
this
had
is
cars,
this is
right? Yeah.
essentially going to work like KERS, isn't it? When we had KERS, you did have that. So you had the little battery on the side of the
Screen.
graphic
Yeah.
that would reduce as they were using the KERS around the lap. Now, hopefully, that's what they'll do here. Just as we come to a bit of a conclusion on this, I just want to summarize that because I think, like I said, I don't want to do a massive downer on what F1 have just released or the FIA have just released. I do think there are some positives that they're talking about in terms of the new engine regulations and the new chassis regulations, but it to me it just comes with that caveat
Yeah.
that we are doing that to appease an incoming engine manufacturer, and the payoff is that we lose potentially a really close championship battle from 2026 onwards.
Yeah, and then again, we'll have to look and see what 2030 shows up with, right? Like, so that'll only be a 4-year window if that's what we're looking at. So I don't know what that will look like in 2030, but that'll be interesting. Well, at least we know that there'll be some level of excitement and that any change can bring, and we'll have to see where the chips fall.
Indeed. All right. As usual, if you like what we're doing here, please like, please subscribe, please leave a comment. We read all of them. We reply to as many as we possibly can. We will see you in the next one.
Later.